Soul Journey of Life on social media.
This is an awakening.
Snap out of it! Thought-provoking, challenging the popular perspectives, critical of today's opinions. We go all the way in deep. What's a thought's worth if thoughts must conform to ill-conceived theories and so-called orthodox beliefs, twisted opinions of hypocrisy? How do we reach new heights? Ascend to higher realizations, activate the powers of abstract reasoning? We must break the chains that hold us down from celestial flights. Face what you think you know with what you have yet to know. For the moment, never mind how you believe things ought to be. We must revolutionize our minds for there to be a clear way to unify. For that to happen, we must have a seat at the table all over again. Just making sure the light works. Unlock the keys of scrutiny. Revive what it means to pursue knowledge. Manifest the God in we, you and me. Welcome to your wake-up call. Soul Journey of Life, Conscious Black Social Media. The Light Dome.
Hello everyone, my name is John Harvey
And my name is Eleanor Harvey.
of J. Harvey Realty Company. We are located at 15704 Waterloo Road in Cleveland, Ohio, in the Waterloo District. We have been in business for 32 years. There is nothing no greater than helping people secure the American dream, a home. We have also helped many investors buy income properties. We specialize in helping people get prepared to purchase homes by getting them pre-approved. When they start looking, they will be able to purchase that home. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, think J. Harvey Realty Company.
Yes, indeed, family. This is your brother Abdul Adud, aka Questman, coming at you live. Soul Journey of Life, Conscious Black Social Media. We're here once again. I'd like to greet the viewers by first saying Salam Alaikum wa Rahmatullahi wa Barakatuhu. Shalom, peace and blessings. Hotep, love. May the grace and mercy of the Almighty be upon the righteous. As you know, we are continuing the reading of the book, The Black We Speak, The Dead Are Arising, The Life of Malcolm X. Pretty intense book with some pretty next level details about the life of Malcolm X. And as you, if you've been reading along, you'll notice it's coming at a bit of an angle that's different than what we may have been used to when we've learned about the life of Malcolm X. So it is pretty interesting, and I have to say, it lines up with other things that I've learned from other sources. So I'd have to also add that it's pretty authentic from what I can tell. As far as speaking about the life of Malcolm X is concerned. Now we're going to continue going into that, but let's see here. I just want to kind of reiterate a little bit. I just got you see, I just got off of work. Literally, I just got off of work, and I came because I knew, that's one job, right? A job in which the resources are coming in one way. Um, this is another job. You understand? Doing this right here is yet another job. It's a job for the benefit of our community, our people. One job, a job for the benefit of my family, one job for the benefit of my people, including my family, right? And so I'm saying that because sometimes it can become challenging because it's an obligation that I take upon myself uh, as something that's necessary to do. Standing up for our people, standing up for um, what I believe to be a righteous cause. Um, Give me a second here. And in this particular cause, I didn't really get to put it in the description this time because I had hastily uh, put together this live so that people would know that it was going to go on. Um, Even though I intended to do it yesterday, but things happen when you're a father and a husband. Um, you again obligations, and everybody's counting on you in some way or fashion. Um, to uphold your responsibilities. And the thing is I could be through a storm, beaten up, chased by a dog. You know, it doesn't matter. I have to still come through no matter what. Shalom, peace and blessings. I still have to come through no matter what at the job. The job, when you go to work, the people you're if you're a contractor like myself, people aren't looking for any excuses. They don't care about if you got bit by a dog, a flat tire. The children aren't looking for those excuses either. They're not looking for any of that. They want to, they want their next meal. You understand? That's what they're concerned about. They want to see you crack open a new bottle of juice. All the, see, so no matter where you go in this world, when it comes to uh, doing what you're supposed to do, your task, nobody wants any excuses. Even here, like, brother, you said you was going to be live at 9 at 8:30. What happened? Well, see, what happened was nobody wants any of that, right? Nobody wants that. Um, but anyway, this becomes all the more easier with the support of the family, the viewers. You understand? When you um donate to the Cash App, the Light Dome, it benefits in multiple ways, more than just perhaps the obvious way. But you may not realize that I actually do things out in the community on a street level, and I do it in a kind of an unorthodox way. I don't like to follow this like a systematic way. I like to sit there and meet people, befriend people, chop it up with people. Um, Oftentimes they don't want to be on cam. They don't want to be made a spectacle of. Some of them, they're homeless. They're going through problems and things like that. So you got those. You got people who've come out of the joint trying to figure out a way, trying to make a way, and having hard times or whatnot. So I tried, and then you got those that are just maybe they're sick or whatever the case may be, and I feel obligated when I come upon these ones and they cross my path to demonstrate some type of act of piety. You understand? Because that's what I believe in. I don't believe that I'm just here just to party all the time. I believe that I'm here, you know, party sometime. No, I'm here to, I have a task to do. I have a task to do, and if you look at the balance of life, it's kind of like that. When you find yourself uh, getting closer to being in sync with life, you feel you see that there's purpose. That reminds me of something, and let me see if I can find it real quick. I had a vision, right? And what's odd about this vision is it's been a while since my last vision. You understand? I'm going to share this with you before I get into. I typed it on my phone. Maybe I can find it on here. Um, but it's been some time since I had a vision, and sometimes that bothers me because I wonder, there could be days where I could have visions back to back. Night after night, day after day, afternoon. It don't matter what time of day or night it is. It'd be like stories unfolding right before my very eyes. I don't know. I don't want you to get spooked out or whatever. Me saying visions and things like that. Sometimes people, I don't know what they take when they hear those words. Um, I'm a spiritual person, inshallah. I'm a spiritual person. At least I like to see myself as on the journey of being a spiritual person. So that means I accept and acknowledge spiritual experiences. You understand? And it may not conform with a lot of this hocus pocus you see on the internet. And maybe some of it's not hocus pocus. It's just, or perhaps I haven't experienced it, so I don't have any way of giving any testimony about it. But what I can do is speak upon my own experiences, right? And for me, visions are very important because it's like a way that connects me to reality. See, we wake up in this world, and there's a level of it that's reality, but we tend not to pay attention to that. We tend to pay attention as a humanity, as a people of this generation, especially. We tend to pay attention to the illusions, the trendings, and the fantasies and whatnot of this world. What we think, what we would like it to be, when you meet somebody, the idea or perspective you think this person is, who you think this person is. And it may completely contradict whatever reality is actually going on, like who the person really is. Some of us, we pander to people who don't really care about us, but we wish they would, and we wish so hard and become so infatuated with that we will allow ourselves to be abused and to be manipulated and corrupted. You understand? As individuals, as collectives, um, and so we tend not to notice reality. Sometimes it takes a moment of pause just to look up out at the night sky, notice the moon. You understand? I know this might be taking a little bit out of the time we need for this reading, but I just believe in me that there's some virtue in what I need to say in all this. Sometimes it's beneficial to step outside and see the moon, even notice what phase it's in. Little things like that often the masses tend not to notice because they're too busy with their hustle and bustle and party all the time, right? These things aren't important to them. These things are not important to these people. The events of life. You understand? And the different experiences that we go through in the real world. People suffering, people having suffering plagues and illnesses and hurts, passing aways. People losing people suffering the loss of life from family members and whatnot. These are things that are really going on that oftentimes they catch us off guard because we're so caught up in the world. And oftentimes, if we were paying attention, we would have noticed that, wait a minute, uh, old school is showing some signs of wear and tear. It's not looking too right. Let me go and follow up and look and check in on my pops or my mom or my my elder. Let me go in and check in on them because you start noticing when you pay attention, and then by the time you pay attention, you notice like, okay, it doesn't look like they're going to be hanging around in this world any much longer. So let me go ahead and do what I need to do to be on, to be supportive of them, to look out for them, make sure they have a a, a good send off. You understand? Just little things, little real life, real world, real existence things that sometimes we just forget to take notice because we're so concerned about our own mouth, our own stomach. You understand? Our own entertainments. So I had this. Um, it might sound kind of off the wall. Listen, but I was napping a little bit, right? Sometimes I work so much and I take a pause, the little lunch break or whatever, and I nap off. And it's just weird because, like I said, I've napped off many times and nothing to show for it, nap, night, night. But here, I phased off, and here's what I saw. And the reason why this is important, because whenever I could do this, whenever I could write it down like this, it tends to stand out to me like there's meaning. And even when I read this to you, there are some aspects that end up being interpreted literally, and there's some aspects which I could tell there is a deeper meaning to it. There's something more being said to my self from myself, from my higher self to my lower self, from my originator to that which is originated. Interpret, put that on whatever formula, Google Translate you want to, whatever. So I said, I wrote, I saw, and this may not be entirely in chronological order. I write in the order that I can remember, and if I remember things in the before that, I just write it down and note that it was prior to such and such. Anyway, and then we'll get on to the task at hand. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Somebody back there's like, come on, can you get on to reading? Can you get on to reading and telling us your vision already? Get on to reading it. I saw that I was able to do pretty much whatever I could think of, think to do. Release. I was able to release like these plasma bubbles of water from my hand. Like there was something I saw, and I just like it was just like a surge in me, like nah, bow, like that, right? I just follow along. Just follow along. uh, I was able to release, like stuff like that from my hand, fireballs. I was able to perform telekinesis. There was like this collection of like paper clips or something, and I formed them together in like a spiraling helicopter thing, and had them moving around and stuff. And I was just musing at this, like, wow, like really, this is what I'm doing now, right? So I was even able to, elevate my own self and kind of fly around. It was kind of tasking though. I felt like it was challenging. Like I had to put a lot of mental effort to it. Like I had to really, really, you know, for it to happen. So yeah, it was challenging. What was challenging, more challenging to me, was me trying to get people to understand something. It's like I was trying to communicate to people that I was with, like I'm doing here now in this live, but actual people in before me, and I was trying to get them to understand something, that something no good was about to happen, like something wasn't right, something no good was about to happen. Like basically we need to hone in on um our skills or whatnot. That's my excerpt right there. That little part right there. We need to hone in on our abilities, or our abilities. Take it as you want. And then so a handful took it seriously. Most kind of look, like they do every day, like like no, I'm not. Oh, I don't. No, no, no. I don't want it. I don't hear it. When you try to, sell somebody, give somebody something, to talk about something that's critical. No, 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 no. Okay, I'm okay. I'm okay. And they shove you off. Keep on going. Most was like that. A handful was to the contrary. Um, so the last At last, I saw a man who was melanated like myself, who had like a hoodie on, and he had no shirt. His shirt, it was like hoodie was just like, he just had a hoodie, not zipped up or anything. You could just see the chest. Um, and he was approaching, and I couldn't decide whether this because I was moving. I was like moving to go in a place, and I was like, wait, somebody's following me. So I look and I see this guy, like this, and he's approaching me, and I was like, I don't know if this person is a friend or foe, and part of me was like, didn't I see this person before at another point in time? But I couldn't be for sure, so I just went ahead and hastily went in, like kind of like uh projected myself inside rather than walked inside. I like boom, and there I'm inside. Um, so because I couldn't tell whether he was well-meaning or what the deal was. I didn't have time to deal with that. I was trying to find out. Uh, so yeah, I basically I like teleported into the building, and it seems as though I was with other people, like like during this time or prior to this time, I was with a small collection of other people, and we was like about to head out of town or head somewhere. We was, I can remember seeing the streets. It was night, and we were about to head out of town or head somewhere out of where we were at. Uh, and this is what I could remember. There was some other elements, um, and it kind of got fuzzy after that. And this was earlier today, about I would say between 4 and 5, somewhere between 4 and 5. Is when I saw this. Yes, I saw it. Why is this important? Because for me, um, ever since I had a vision where it was interactive with the Most High, it kind of made me look at visions and stuff whole scale differently. I can remember one of my earliest visions that I wrote down were, I'm asking the Most High, and I've shared this before. Um, I use the Arabic formula, and I'm not limited or confined to this. For me, the Most High has an infinitum of names, and it takes a wisdom to understand what that said, what I'm saying right there. Because if you even look, you are seeing one of the names or multitudes of names of the Most High. If you just open your eyes and even just look, the minute you listen, you hear even more. And the minute you even dare to think, oh man, it comes rushing in. All those names. Um, but one that I have a traditional habit of using is Allah. And in this particular vision, I'm saying, "Oh Allah, show me a sign," and I'm saying it with like deep passion, like I'm like crying and everything, and I'm like I felt like I was like suspended in the cosmos when I was in this condition. I wasn't bodily. You understand? I can see like maybe there's a star or sun or something or some type of star off in the distance. It's dark. It's like little specks of light here and there. Um, but mostly dark, except for the feeling of light um in front of me. Give me one moment. Let me pause this camera just like that. Boom. So the feeling of light, Asante Sana, was what I was experiencing during that time. Asante Sana. hmm And let's see, there we go. But it was during that time I said, "Oh Allah, show me a sign." And immediately upon me saying that, I was shown a lotus blossom, like a lotus. I don't know if you ever seen a lotus blossom. Let me see if I can show you a lotus blossom real quick. I'm trying to get to the reading, family, but let me, when I get into this, I gotta, I take these things seriously. Let's see, just so you could kind of get an idea of what I saw. I spelled it wrong. Blossom. Okay. So Can I show it to you like this? Yeah, that's a pretty good one. Although the one I saw was white, but here's basically the same shape and position that I saw it in. Same shape, same position. This is a lotus blossom. All right. So imagine that. I'm going to change the background a bit because there's a background that I tend to use on my midnight thought talks that reminds me of the uh, the way the moon looked. Let me stop sharing this just for a second so you can see the background. I gotta take. What do I need to do? Let's get back on there. So that's what I saw, family, and then I woke up at some point, but it's like that part like just hung on me for many, 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 many moments of my life as one of my earliest, and I was an adult when I had that, but my earliest interactive, I call it interactive because I felt I was connected with the heavens, the cosmos. I felt connected at that point. Um, so I'm trying to think of when my last vision experience was. It's been a while. Like I'd say maybe a year or so, right? And that's why this one caught me off guard. I'm just sitting there, you know, I'll sit there and and I'm in my vehicle taking my break, which I got to be careful because these folks like to roll up on people taking naps in their cars nowadays, and me being melanated, that they tend to not like melanated folks napping in their cars for some real reason. They feel threatened by melanated folks napping in their cars on their lunch breaks. So anyway, I haven't been too much of afraid or whatnot. I feel like I've worked hard. A little nap, it's not gonna hurt anybody. But it was during that type of moment. I'm just sitting there, and then I started seeing these things. Um. Anyway, so I had to share that with you, family. That was my little moment of show and tell. Let's see here. So I'm still reflecting upon the meanings of that vision. It does tell me something about being active. Like I said earlier, one of the things that I felt as I was sharing it with you was we need to hone in on our skills, our talents, our abilities. Whether if you got financial skills, if you got economic skills, building skills, intellectual skills, whatever it be, hone in on it. And I was thinking about this because it was saying a lot about uh, stuff coming from my hands. And I was like, wow, in most of my occupations or whatnot, I'm a hands-on type person. I'm fixing something with my hands. Just today, I was fixing a router with my hands. You know, but anyway, there's that. There is that, family. Um, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Show your support. Um, before I get on, I just want to see, here's the thing, like I said, even when I do these things, it's not entirely orthodox. It's not entirely like uh, the run of the mill YouTubers or content creators. I go off of inspiration. You know what I mean? Sometimes I'll have scripts of detailed things that I definitely want to talk about, but sometimes, even when I have that, sometimes I like to communicate what's coming deep from in me, right? Um, let's see here.
So I just want to play this song just for a minute, family. Bear with me. After me playing this song, uh, this is a song from my most recent album. You've heard it. If you heard the most recent album, that is Code of the Rain. And let's see here. Let me just share with you like this. And once this is done, we will get to what we came to do. In the cold of the rain, how many of you know the pain as I search across the plains? The agony and pain, who's to blame? What I gotta do just to keep from going insane? Pain that nobody sees deep within me, pleading for divine mercy. How could it be? This soul journey tells a story, a lost boy in a lost world. I watch the flames of sin as the fire swirl. There's a hole in my soul, how to heal, too numb to even feel. I sit and watch the spinning of the wheel. The clock ticks, devils playing mind tricks. White lines see me, a default convict. Every day a new plot twist. In the midst of the mist, gunshots, just your everyday background sounds. Tears roll down the ancient canal. Once heard wise words, forgot to write it down. The candlelight flickers in the night. Imagine shapes dancing as they fight. It's the unseen sounds I sight. You can say what you want. I travel a long way to the source of the thunder. Whatever way. I wonder, why am I in the cold of the rain? How many of you know the pain as I search across the plains? Seen some things will never change in the cold of the rain. How many of you know the pain as I search across the plains? See some things will never change, never change, never change. Those shots that took the breath my father breathed and the seeds in need. To this day my heart still bleeds. What did it take to become the man I am? I am who I am, holding tightly to this rope in my hand, reaching out my hand. Who is there to lend me a helping hand? Upload my verses till the sight is blurry. No mercy, show mercy. Don't hate me, don't hurt me. I see you in the shadows lurking. I see you wanna draw down the closing curtains. I knock the dust off my knees, through the flames, through the breeze, 360 degrees, the stars in the sky. Life as I know it, what keeps me high. You would never know it as I pass by. Just a momentary notice, I know it's crazy. I never asked for the sauce or the gravy. A thick smoke in the air, got me feeling hazy. What do you care? I bleed out, you just stand and stare. It was inside that I cried. No one ever told me what to do with all the lies. Where is it all going? I rest my neck, eyes open wide. At night I watch the sunrise, the sunrise, sunrise, sunrise. In the cold of the rain, how many of you know the pain as I search across the plains? Seen some things will never change. In the cold of the rain, how many of you know the pain as I search across the plains? Seen some things will never change. In the cold of the rain, how many of you know the pain as I search across the plains? See some things will never change. In the cold of the rain, how many of you know the pain as I search across the plains? See some things will never change, never change, never change, never change, never change. Is true, real experiences or thoughts, things observed. You understand? It's always authentic content when it comes to me and what I have to say. I can remember when I was in
Djibouti, which is a little country in Africa. And I was in a complex on the second floor, and I looked out the window, and there was a building that had caught on fire. And the thing that was most astonishing to me about that way that fire was going is it had like a spiraling, it spiraled up, you understand? And it was spiraling up ferociously, like that, like boom, just going up harshly. And I was thinking to myself, like, wow, that's deep right there. You understand? I was just thinking about other uh symbolisms of what I was looking at, that have been expressed in scripture and such. It just had a very um a very impactful um experience for me. um Look around, family. Sometimes you just got to take the time out and look around, because there's miracles, there's just awe-inspiring moments happening every single day of your life. Sometimes you just got to pause what you're doing or keep doing what you're doing, but look, listen. You know how they say, what is it? What they say with a emergency? Stop, look, and listen. You got to do that. Stop, look, and listen, and you'd be surprised at what you would notice in people, in natural life, in the herbal life, and in the cosmos. You'd be surprised at just what you will see. There's so much we miss every day, telling us, letting us know portents of what's coming, letting us know how we're doing. Even your own bodies constantly informing you, but many of us don't pay much attention. I had some stuff going on, still got it going on. People were asking why were people praying. I don't know if you know what a hyper extension is, but that's something that's going on all of a sudden. But anyway, you know, I try to live not in fear of ending, because I know that's inevitable in this life, and then will come. So I try to do and make do as best as I can, and there it is. Not trying to hasten the moment, but eventually, one day something's going to happen, and I've got to leave this phase of existence and go into whatever the next phase shall be for me. um but just look, family, just look, just go out there, just go in there wherever you are. Take the time out and look. Just take the time out and look and be a part of it. Be in sync with your experience. Don't make it small. Don't make it insignificant, like it doesn't matter. Be in sync with it. Just get out there and go. Like I said, we're so tough and hardcore and thuggish, ruggish, or whatever. All this, that we already know. You can't tell us anything. Um, that we don't even experience anything anymore. We don't even um move in a way that invites these divine experiences. And then the people who are on some bogus stuff, they get to shout out all this bogus stuff, and then when the real stuff happens, it's hard to tell the difference, because you've heard so many bogus things. Well, this brother, what is he saying? you know Sometimes real things do happen, family. Let's get into this reading. So I'm going to share it on this screen here. I got two screens. We're going to present it on this screen. I can read it like that. Okay. Yes, indeed. Sometimes you just got to perceive. You just got to look with a greater um, observation, ability. There it is, right here. All right. So if you remember, we last left off on page 37 at the where the three lines are right there that you see. That the paragraph under that is where we are going to continue. Um, we've been going in real deep with this. We're still talking about, reading about, some of the elements that took place before Malcolm X became the Malcolm X that we've learned about. So, he's like a pretty much a baby at this point in time. His father is going through all kinds of things. His father was a soldier. His father was a revolutionary in his own right. So it only made sense that his son would inherit, something of, what came from his father. From one revolutionary, pass that down to the next, the new and improved. With the features, the qualities of his time. So you got to salute both. You got to salute the father, because the father was taking on what Garvey was dealing with during their time. You understand? He was basically a Garveyite, and that in its own self is empowering to hear. That in its own self is empowering to hear, because see, man, these people were no joke people. You got to understand what I'm saying. We see things going on nowadays, and a lot of hocus pocus and hype, people making bank off of our conditions, off of our suffering, people showing up only because it's convenient to milk financially off of our dilemma, the systemic races. And then the people who are real, we end up, talking down on them, shaming them, hating them, blaming them, accusing them of being agents and the like. They end up getting their lives taken or getting incarcerated. These are the times we're in. And if you look around, in so many ways, the rest of the world is watching, just trying to figure out. That one person was putting it like, well, man, these people should be enraged. The way we behave. Either we're afraid of this devil, or we're too comfortable, or we become so naive, so lost in the sauce, that we've forgotten that we're in a state of suffering, that we're in a state of war. Look, think about this. Imagine if one of the European countries bust up in China, start kidnapping folks, and take them back to France or Germany or something. What do you think the response is going to be? I'll wait. What do you think the response is going to be? It's going to be war. The people of China will get all their stuff. It wouldn't even be a talk anymore. There'd be war right there, immediately. And it wouldn't stop until they've satisfied the retaliation. Here we are, 400, 500 years later, and not even the thought of, wait a minute. First of all, I'm not here by my own acceptance. I'm here. I've been forced to be here. I'm talking about even as a descendant. My ancestors fought to be liberated. Their blood was spilt because they refused to stay here, to be enslaved, to be subjected to somebody else. Overseas, they were still fighting. Wars were still going on, fighting off the Portuguese, fighting off the British and whatnot, the Italians, fighting them off. And here we are, generations later, living our life like you would think nothing's ever happened. If you looked at us now, you would think we hadn't been through anything. Like this is the way it's always been. Family, when you hijack or kidnap people or enslave people from another country, those people are in a state of war at that time. That's war going on. I'm telling you, let's just like I said, put another people in the place. Put the Koreans. Put I don't know, you name it. Okay, put what are they called? Imagine Sweden. Imagine what would happen, or Poland. I was going to say Poland. Imagine, somebody from India snatching up some people from Poland. How do you think Poland's going to respond? You think Poland's like, oh, well, you guys need to stop. Or let's say time goes on that they don't immediately respond. What do you think the people who've been snatched up are going to do? You think they're just going to chill out like, oh, shoot, we've been snatched up. We might as well just join in India and become the people, Polish Indians. We might as well just accept and start protesting and begging for our rights from the Indians. Do you think that's what would happen? But that's exactly what we're doing. We've been enslaved from our own place of being. We were fighting there in that time, saying, no, you can't enslave us. We don't want to be enslaved. We're going to fight you and fight you and fight you. We get beat up. Some of us were already here. Door got kicked in, saying, look, happy Thanksgiving. We're coming in. You had that going on. And then all of a sudden, 2023, look at us. 2023, you would think that nothing had happened at all. Our response is like inhumane. Shalom. Our response is so inhumane, so unnatural. Or maybe in some ways there's a natural aspect to it, but there's also an unnatural aspect, because anything else in existence would respond in a state of threat. They would feel like, wait a minute, things are not right. I'm not where I should be. I'm not in the position that I should be in. Things are not how they should be. I can't accept this. And I'm going to continue to fight you until things are restored to the way they ought to be. That's not our situation. We've basically accepted and assimilated into the establishment. It said, well, I know I'm not you, but can I have the rights that you have for your own self? Why can't you treat me like you treat you, like you treat your own? Why can't we be treated equal? Well, wait a minute. Let me remind you, you were kidnapped and enslaved. How do you think that works out? Do you think that if somebody will be trapped up somewhere in another country, that they're going to be treated like the natives of the land in a state of war? If the U.S. was to snatch up some Koreans, how do you think they're going to be treated? You think they're going to be treated like equals? Like, okay, you're over here in the U.S. now. Join in the great melting pot. Join in the great melting pot. You know, you're now a Korean American. I know we snatched you up and kidnapped you, but now, calm down. Here's a few rights you can have while you're at it. The basketball game is on at 9 prime time. Do you think that's how it will go? Or do you think those people would be looking for any opportunity either to retaliate or to escape? Anything other than accept their predicament. That's what we have done as a people. We've accepted being enslaved, and then we've accepted being the descendants of the conditions in our environment that still smack of enslavement. How so? Because we're still being ruled by the descendants of our ancestors, enslavers. We're still being ruled. We still don't have any ability to dictate what happens for our own people, let alone not to mention the fact that we've forgotten what people we are. We got our hands full, family, and nothing's right about this. Here I am, manifesting that dream. Go figure. Anyway, I'm telling you, man, it gets deep to me. Whenever I just start to think, family, it's deep to me. It's astonishing to me, how we are responding. Let's read this. Page 37 at the bottom paragraph. Let me see if you guys can see it. Let me do this screen right here, and then you can see it better, right? Oh, I'll just make it bigger. How about that? So hopefully you can see it. It's there. By the way, you can download this. It is a PDF. Easy to get. This was free. I didn't even have to pay or anything. It's a straight PDF. Okay. Oh, I don't like doing that. I did that before, and I ended up missing the page. So let me shrink it. Hopefully you guys can see. Is that 100%? Is that 100%? Already some 2 generations out of slavery, when statistically they had been 3/5 of a person, Negroes, conducted an unrequited love affair with the republic that had reluctantly, at best, freed them in 1863. They fought in the U.S. wars and paid taxes. They rendered cheap labor on railroads and docks, in factories, private kitchens, and cotton fields. Although fulfilling the obligations of citizenship, Negroes were systemically denied the benefits. White supremacy was certified and enforced as a national policy by the full force of the Supreme Court, Congress, and the executive branch of the federal government, although in wholly different ways. Courts, 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal ruling was a sham, a sham decision that froze in place an impregnable caste structure under legalized segregation. Negroes were repressed as a permanent underclass and were flagrantly denied equal access to housing, jobs, education, public accommodation, due process in the courts, and despite the passage of the 15th Amendment, the guaranteed right to vote, even when American women were granted the vote in 1920, Negroes across gender lines were largely denied the franchise, especially in the South, where some 80% of them lived. Doesn't seem like too much has changed. This is a night. This is they just mentioned the 1920s right there. We're 2023. That's not even that's a century and 3 years ago, right? Century and 3 years ago. Not much has changed. Even in the nation's capital, racial segregation was the law of the land, harshly enforced by no less authority than that of the president. In addition to mandating separate and less well appointed and maintained cafeterias and toilet facilities for Negroes in federal buildings, Woodrow Wilson had allowed the Treasury Department and the Post Office to segregate black civil service employees from whites by makeshift wooden partitions. One colored postal clerk whose duty required regular contact with whites in the office had a cage built around him. According to a letter of complaint to the to President Wilson from noted scholar W.E.B. Du Bois. When, as previously mentioned, William Monroe Trotter, the editor of the widely read Negro newspaper, the Boston Guardian, took a delegation of Negro leaders to the White House to protest this segregated federal policy, President Wilson rebuffed them sharply. Wait a second here. Segregation is not humiliating, but a benefit and ought to be so regarded by you gentlemen, President Wilson told the delegation from the National Independent Equal Rights League during its November 12, 1914 visit. When Trotter disputed Wilson's claim that federal employees were racially separated to avoid friction, the president, as widely reported in the New York Times and elsewhere, cited Trotter's tone as dismissed the delegation leader. Your manner offends me, Wilson muttered. Despite street rallies defending Trotter, the federal government continued to segregate the races for decades. When in early 1917, the president subsequently petitioned Congress to enter the war in Europe to make the world safe for democracy, Negro leaders debated what their stance should be towards an administration that so egregiously denied them equal rights. Should they push for inclusion in American society and join the fight? Oh, man. I'm just thinking about the conversation they would have had during that time. After having supported Wilson's candidacy in 1912, Du Bois was appalled by the president's eager collaboration with racist Southern legislators. However, just as abolitionist leader Frederick Douglass had argued for blacks to fight during the Civil War, Du Bois urged them to join the ranks of Wilson's racially segregated army and drew sharp personal criticism for his support. Yeah, I can imagine so. I mean, joining the fight is one thing, but it's kind of hard to fight with those who are looking at you like you're not even their equal, who are looking down at you even on the battlefield. Although I heard some stories that in some cases, uh, certain countries, you know, didn't have that same perspective. If you were out there fighting the fight, they had a respect for it, even though they knew that you guys weren't on agreement on certain things. They respected each other out there on the battlefield. Some say that was the case in some cases. Let's see. Uh, Prison for his support. Okay. White military officers, however, were reluctant to field armed black GIs against the European soldiers of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the other Central Powers. The Marines strongly opposed accepting Negro volunteers, and those the Navy accepted were restricted to non-combatant menial posts as stewards or mess hall workers. Think of this, family. This is something I mean, while these brothers are in the military, you got to remember, just about some hundreds of years before that, they were fighting in a different way. They were fighting in the ranks of the Moors and the ranks of different African nations that were conquering Europe. Just centuries before that, they were up in Europe's place. Now they're begging just to join the ranks of the U.S. military. I mean, just think about that in a chronological order. Put that here, put that on the counter. Like on this date, on this year, the Moors were in Spain. Black folks were in Spain, conquering it, occupying it, ruling it. Just a handful of 100 years later, just a handful, they're enslaved in America, so-called freed at some point. Now they're back in Europe. They were fighting Germany, back in Europe, but this time in a subordinate way, in a lesser than thou way. And many of them didn't even have the knowledge. Some of you could say they didn't have the knowledge that, hey, we're the same folks. We're the descendants of the same folks who did this hundreds of years before. But I imagine some did. And I imagine some of them took very great pleasure in fighting the fight. It's kind of like a way to express yourself when you can't express yourself to the people that you would like to express them to. When you see someone who's like them, you say, oh, well, this is what I would like to do to you, but I'm going to do it to these ones who are just like you. And I'm going to give it my all. Think about the different battalions, black battalions that are renowned to this day, and look them up and see just how rigorous their combat skills were. Anyway, we're still in that paragraph. Still, some 2.3 million Negroes registered for the draft, with 370,000 inducted into the military. And despite heavy resistance from white officers and fellow soldiers, Negroes performed acts of battlefield valor that went largely unnoticed, at least by them. There's still some reports that we get. If you do your research, you'll see what some of those brothers was doing over there. They weren't playing a game. They weren't playing around. In fact, it's because of them that this whole war was even won to begin with. It's because of them. Look it up. You don't have to take my word for it. There was parts where people was getting ready to run tail when the brothers showed up. Some of them throwing themselves into the heat of the battle. Turned everything around.
Not until 73 years later, when when a government review disclosed strong racial bias in the Army, would America award a Medal of Honor to a black combatant from World War One. Yeah. In a 1991 White House ceremony, President George H.W. Bush presented the honor to the sister of Corporal Freddie Stowers. I wonder what his agenda was for doing this. She deserved the award, but I wonder what his, when these guys do stuff like that, there's something underhanded that they're really trying to get at, and this is just the bridge to help them get it done. President George H.W. Bush presented the honor to the sister of Corporal Freddie Stowers, who had been recommended for it shortly after he died from wounds suffered when he led an assault on fortified German trenches. In a post-war editorial in the Crisis, Du Bois, again, like Frederick Douglass, urged Negroes to close ranks for full citizenship and to marshal every ounce of our brain and brawn to fight a sterner, longer, more unbending battle against the forces of hell in our own land. What I'm wondering, though, is it seemed like to me when we had brothers who was in positions of leadership amongst us, like Frederick Douglass, Du Bois, and Garvey, massive amounts of us gathered around these brothers and listened to them and unified. And I'm thinking to myself about, when we hear brothers like Farrakhan and Khalid Muhammad and I don't know, you name it. You go on any side of the spectrum. It's like we're becoming tone deaf and not responding to leadership in our days. We're not responding to leadership in our days. It's like we don't. Something very serious is missing. But I have met brothers and sisters where the passion is there, the passion, the drive, the desire for change to take place is there. But we need so much more. Most importantly, we need to be unified, family. We need to be unified, man. I'm telling you, it's when I keep seeing these reports of the brutalities and things like that, I'm like, man, just look at how much difference unity would make. That could not happen. It could not go down this way. I saw some folks roughing up one of those so-called server and protectors, roughing them up. It changed everything. This was a report. You could probably Google it or something if they still have it up. It changed everything. Dude calmed down real fast, and there was not too much they could do because the whole area was like, no, you're just not going to do that to brother. You're going to arrest him, but you're going to arrest him intact. You're not going to do all this other funny stuff over here. That made all the difference. Perhaps more should have happened, but even that was that little bit made a difference. I don't know why at what point have we become so numb to our response? I will tell you, the point when we started perceiving ourselves as individuals and not a people, to the point where it's not my responsibility, you're not my responsibility, you're not my concern, what should I care? The minute we started having mentalities like that, we become divided, and it's like we don't see ourselves in one another. One reason, because some of our aspirations is to be like the adversary. That doesn't mean that we want to be white, but we want to live white. We want to live like the white lives. You understand? Instead of fighting for our own and establishing our own and insisting upon our own, building, constructing our own, learning from our past mistakes. Like, okay, the last time we did this, they bombed us. We're going to do it again, but this time we're going to develop the correct alliances, and they're not going to get to be able to bomb us ever again. Change, I'm telling you, man. Anyway. Let's continue. So that paragraph, I got to start it. In a post-war editorial in the Crises, Du Bois, again like Frederick Douglass, urged Negroes to close ranks for full citizenship and to marshal every ounce of our brain and brawn to fight a sterner, longer, more unbending battle against the forces of hell in our land. Later in 1919, Du Bois more specifically wrote, "For 3 centuries, we have suffered and cowered. No race ever gave passive submission to evil longer, more piteous trial. Today, we raise the terrible weapon of self-defense. When the murder comes, he shall no longer strike us in the back. When the armed lynchers gather, we too gather armed. We too must gather armed. When the mob moves, we propose to meet it with bricks and clubs and guns. Despite the odds, Du Bois urged Negroes to make their armed stand in a land where their forebears labored and died as slaves." Now, this I can agree with Du Bois on, because to me it sounded like he had the right scope. There's a lot of other philosophical things where we defer, because he deferred with Marcus in the matter, and in those aspects, it's all Garvey. It's all Garvey, like gravy. It's all Garvey. And this is he's like what you would call like a kind of a conservative mindset. I mean, based upon the mindset that many of us are having today, we should be having the same. I mean, at the very least, if you're not wanting to go all in like Khalid Muhammad, at the very least, you should be wanting to, like, look, let me get a brick, a club, a gun, something, and make sure that you don't run up in our place getting carried away. We got to stop being bystanders and observers, picture takers. Have someone take the picture so you can have the evidence, but there needs to be some other ones handling business. You understand? You only need a few cameras. The other ones are hands that could be doing something else. It makes all the difference, family. But one of the things we got to stop doing is seeing them in us, perceiving them like somehow we would want them to perceive us, because they're never going to see us the way they see themselves. And I mean, even the most passive one is still going to see themselves as somehow in some way superior. If you listen to a curse, if you conversate, hold a conversation, and you'll see the moment they deny you your ability to be your own person, you have just met yourself a racist. And they may not, they may argue to the point that they're not, but you just found yourself a racist. The moment they don't want to acknowledge that you have lost everything, you've got yourself a racist. They haven't lost everything. They want to equate their present day current struggle because they lost their job, or they did this, they didn't know how to farm, they didn't know how to run a business or whatever. But guess what? They're still able to identify with their culture. They still can speak their language. They can still walk their way. They can still celebrate their festivities. Man. Mm-mm-mm. Despite the odds, Du Bois urged Negroes to make their arms stand in the land where their forebears labored and died as slaves. The foreign-born Marcus Garvey was convinced otherwise and counseled not black fight, but black flight, at least psychologically. In other words, he was like, we ain't even trying to blend in over here. We're not even trying to mix with this situation over here. Because of course, Marcus, we need our own thing. We need our own operations, our own everything. We just need our own. That's them. That's their fight. You do you. I get it. I get it. And I think in our day and time, we need to evaluate all of the scholarly ones and look and find a middle ground. Find what wisdom we can get out of all these positions and apply it in our day and time now. What is for sure is that we should be doing something. Sitting is not an option. Docile is not an option. Passivity, tucking tails, coonery, none of these things are options for us. They're just not an option. All these things smack of only fatality against our favor. The foreign-born Marcus Garvey was convinced otherwise and counseled not black fight, but black flight, at least psychologically, and in some cases physically, from the presence and influence of the white men he considered irredeemably racist, irredeemably, meaning there's no ever way that they could be right about this or be this could be overlooked or forgiven. Too numerous and far too well trained, too well armed. In this conflict of perspectives, Garvey would capture the loyalty of both Malcolm's Caribbean-born mother and his rebellious father from Georgia. Yeah. And that makes sense. I don't know if you are aware of this, but there is a biblical passage where there is this it says the messenger or the prophet who prophesy of peace is the prophet of God, right? Because at that time, one person was trying to get them basically to go into battle blind. Another person was like, nah, we ain't ready for none of that. We ain't ready to go in any battle right now. What are we going to do? We go in that battle, our whole nation is going to be annihilated. There's wisdom. There's time and place. You pay attention to the weather, so to speak. Pay attention to the weather, and the weather will present itself. I'm talking about the social weather, the civil weather, and it will let you know the proper time and place for the proper action, proper moves to make. And sometimes it's kind of like, when you see in the movie, they're all tied up in ropes and whatnot, and you see somebody gradually, rubbing the rope to get it loose. And while everybody else is talking the capturer, talking them to, draping them off or whatever, slowly but surely, the ones getting them ropes undone. And eventually, and even when the ropes are undone, they still don't move just yet because the window of opportunity must present itself. The moment that window of opportunity comes, there can be no cowardice. There can be no hesitation. You got to move with all confidence and do what you know you need to do. Earl Little, a restless man of prodigious energy, with a whispered reputation as a ladies' man, visited the homes of curious Negroes to ply his admixture of Christian gospel and secular Garveyism. Africa was the homeland, sure enough, but Garvey's group did not call for mass repatriation in the near term. And unless the specific question was raised, the third grade educated Reverend Little did not discuss global Pan-African repatriation at all. Combating white dominance in the United States during the first quarter of the 20th century broke down roughly along these two distinct tactical lines pushed by the NAACP and UNIA, and spearheaded nationally by W.E.B. Du Bois on one side and Marcus Garvey on the other. Ironically, each man had been influenced earlier on by Booker T. Washington, the famed educator who started Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, and who published his influential autobiography Up from Slavery in 1901. Interesting. However, the internecine battle between the two camps and their strong-minded leaders would rage for years, even as Negroes continued their central struggle for equality. Du Bois had posed the global parameters of the racial conflict, though not the solution, in his 1903 book, The Souls of Black Folk. The problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. The relation of the darker to the lighter races of men in Asia and Africa, in America, and in the islands of the sea. Garvey, agreeing that European colonialism was the dominant world force at the turn of the century, advocated that indigenous peoples in Africa, India, and the rest of Asia should rise up and reclaim their occupied homelands from the illicit white settlers and leave them Europe, with the United States and the West Indies apparently to be shared with the indigenous people of the American landmasses. The British colonization of Jamaica had been a key trigger for Marcus Garvey's program when, at the age of 27, he founded the UNIA and expanded it as a bulwark against white rule and racism in the West Indies, Africa, Europe, and elsewhere. Following his relocation in America in 1916, the skilled, self-assured promoter, a printer by trade, launched his organization in Harlem, the newly acclaimed capital of Negro America, almost 50 years after the Civil War, offering his "Up, You Mighty Race" call to the colored citizens, which seemed more practical than the NAACP program. The Jamaican leader began barnstorming key cities at the north and also ventured as far south as Atlanta. The great West Indian Negro leader, as Garvey was billed on promotional posters, directed his message of inspiration to the 12 million of our people in this country. And during World War I, he found a surprisingly receptive audience among the thousands of Southern Negroes streaming north in search of industrial jobs at the start of the Great Migration, which would continue into the 1970s and total some 6 million persons. Accordingly, Garvey skillfully went after the non-reading Negro masses in America with pomp, glitz, and ceremony. He staged colorful street parades, complete with marching bands, black crosses, nurses in white, and erect bearing decked out in military uniforms with medals, lavaliers, and swords. The lead touring car of this extravaganza showcased the honorable president, as Garvey was referred to, done up in a naval dress uniform with gold buttons, sash, silver saber, and a plump cap befitting a crowned emperor. This pomp and circumstance was intended to improve blacks' self-respect. We must canonize our saints. I'm laughing because I've said this and I didn't even know Marcus Garvey said those words. That we must canonize what our elders, what our adepts have put forth. We must canonize our own saints, created our own martyrs, and elevate to positions of fame and honor black men and women who have made their distinct contributions to our racial history, Garvey insisted. During the post-war years, the UNIA met in its Liberty Hall site in Harlem with an initial membership mainly of West Indians, who constituted roughly a quarter of the non-white population in Upper Manhattan. In due course, Garvey also would attract homegrown Negroes streaming out of the South to work in the war industries of the North and the Midwest. The group's first New York City convention in 1920 packed Madison Square Garden with some 25,000 blacks from throughout the hemisphere, boasting 4 million members by 1923. The UNIA ultimately listed some 700 branches in 38 states. Insiders put the U.S. number at 20,000 to 30,000 dues-paying members, with thousands more curiosity seekers, supporters, and hangers-on. Garvey would turn out to be one of the most charismatic evangelists of the 1920s. The federal government zeroed in on him as an exceptional, fine orator, creating much excitement among the Negroes through his steamship proposition, and saw in his appeal seditious potential. In other words, he was getting the job done. He was doing what worked. The Black Star Steamship Line was a major fundraising campaign Garvey had launched to establish a shipping operation between the United States and Africa. In a 1919 memo, the young J. Edgar Hoover, head of the Special Intelligence Division in the Bureau of Investigation, the predecessor of the FBI, specializing in deporting undesirable aliens, took note of Marcus Garvey as a prominent agitator among Negroes. Unfortunately, Hoover wrote Special Agent Ridgely on October 11th, Garvey has not as yet violated any federal law whereby he could be proceeded against on ground of being an undesirable alien. With an eye toward building a federal deportation case, however, Hoover noted that there might be some proceeding against him for fraud with his Black Star Line propaganda. Subsequently, in a pattern of domestic spying that would expand ominously through the years and would eerily echo 40 years later in its surveillance of Malcolm X, the Bureau hired 4 Negroes to work the case and had one of them infiltrate the UNIA and spy on Garvey's every move. In Harlem, detailed memos were filed on all meetings, official contacts, and the group's financial records. Unaware of the government's surveillance, Garvey stridently promoted Africa as the proud homeland of all blacks, and unlike Du Bois and the NAACP, he countered claims of white supremacy by proclaiming that, if anything, the Negro was superior. This clarion message had no visible means of enforcement, but it was anathema nonetheless to the white population of early 20th century Omaha and the Midwest that baby Malcolm's parents encountered. Nationally, the NAACP and its leaders, along with other racially mixed civil rights groups, as well as mainstream Negro churches, would defer with the UNIA, however, exactly to combat the formidable superstructure of racism that had characterized the United States since its very founding as a slave-holding republic. Thundering against the Western view of the colonized dark continent as a basket case, the fiery Jamaican leader urged Negroes foremost to work for the total redemption of Africa and to join him in correcting this distorted image of the continent. I want Mr. Du Bois to know that all American Negroes are not ashamed of Africa, Garvey told a Liberty Hall audience decades before an elderly Du Bois would move to Ghana. Why should we allow the Dutch, the Boers, and others to go down into Kimberley and possess the diamond fields? Why should we allow the Belgians to go down into the Congo and reap the profits of rubber? We shall stand by the slogan, Africa for the Africans. The global philosophy of the UNIA was summarized in Garvey's Declaration of Rights of the Negro Peoples of the World, which he placed alongside the Bible as a guide for those who with confidence in ourselves, could carry our way to liberty. If Africans scattered throughout the diaspora were to progress as a people anywhere in the world, Garvey declared that they must first reclaim the birthplace of mankind as their noble motherland. Broadly, he asked, where is the black man's government? Where is the king and kingdom? Pardon my daughter there, making that noise over there. I got distracted. See what happened? See what you did? Uh, if Africa scattered throughout the diaspora were to progress as a people anywhere in the world, Garvey declared that they must first reclaim the birthplace of humankind as their noble motherland. Broadly, he asked, where is the black man's government? Where is his king and kingdom? Yeah, the question is still going on right now. Where is his president, his country, and his ambassador, his army, his navy, his men of big affairs? As part of a symbolic response to these questions, Garvey designed a black, red, and green flag for his new republic and declared himself provisional president. And to this day, I hold on to my, you can't see it because the green screen is going to block out the green part. But yeah, I recommend that if you are about any concept of unity for our people, you need to have that flag up in your place. Can't you see what? Oh man, can't you see what? The vision is still ongoing. It hasn't stopped, and it's not unique to just him. This is instinctive, fam. This is the natural way a human being, a breed of people, should think about themselves when it comes to self-preservation. When it comes to just the basic survival tactics of living. This is, I mean, knowing that you're a people of your own and looking across the world, seeing that every community has an authority, has an identity, has means of representation, and so on. And the only people that do not are our own. We're broken up into two: those who recognize this and those who've forgotten who they are so much that they believe themselves to be no different than white people. And so they think in their mind that they've blended in, and that it's just a matter of convincing white people to treat them fairly and treat them equally. Just something to think about. That's all I'm saying. Just something to think about. The tricolors were subsequently would subsequently be adapted by a few African countries upon their liberations. I can think Kenya as being one of those. Kenya has a red, black, and green flag as well. And they have their shield in the middle of it. As a practical matter, however, the UNIA short term was never the single-minded back to Africa movement that outside critics claimed. During these post-World War years, Reverend Earl Little embraced Garvey while in Omaha, but chiefly urged Negroes to organize and improve their lot here. Give me a second here. Scroll this down a little bit. Improve their lot here in the white man's country. In this, Earl followed the lead of his other key hero, fellow Southerner Booker T. Washington, whose Up from Slavery had inspired the teenage Garvey himself. In his celebrated 1895 speech dubbed the Atlanta Compromise, Washington, born into slavery in 1856 in Virginia, had urged Negroes to acquiesce to the status quo. It might have been the thing to do then. That makes sense then. But I'm not sure that that's the road and route we should be endeavoring on now, especially when we're so broken up and lost. Yeah, acquiesce to the status quo and to advance in America by lowering their more lofty expectations. In other words, that Garvey stuff that's way up here, let's just get down. We're a little bit more realistic and just be a good little Negro. Maybe not to that extent, but that's the gist of it that I'm understanding. This plea for an apparent accommodation with segregation, including famously advising his followers to cast down your buckets where you are, earned him the embrace of white Southerners and rendered Washington the most influential Negro in America. While praising Washington, the great sage of Tuskegee, as a mentor and even as the inspiration for the formation of the UNIA, Garvey geared his international group to move well beyond Washington's domestic plans of industrial serfdom and industrial peonage. Garvey's group would demand a place in the political sun for the 400 million Negroes of the world. The UNIA leader blamed even Frederick Douglass, who had died in 1895, as well as Washington and contemporary Negro leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois for not preparing the minds of the people for the approaching age. No, we won't make that mistake. Give me a second here. Let's see how much we have to go through. Yes, this is a job. This is a job, family. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Get this out there. Let's communicate. Let's break bread with others. Let's get the family unified with common values, common accord. Give me a moment here. As Garveyites, the parents of young Malcolm followed UNIA's policy of referring to Africa as the homeland. Most Negroes, however, under the sway of Hollywood and prevailing public opinion, rejected the dark continent as a nation of savages and an unspeakable embarrassment. Seems like that's going on to this very day, that there's still this opposition to seeing Africa as motherland. It seems like before we got here, we knew that Africa was motherland, and this wouldn't have been something to argue about. You don't find anywhere in our history where we argued about Africa as being motherland. Prior towards enslavement, I'm talking about. If you look at anything that's from us, I don't find this as being an argument. This is a new age thing. You understand? Where this is even up for debate. During Africa's long and genocidal history of slavery and suppression, Negroes have been conditioned by state terror and brutal campaigns against aggressive leaders such as Nat Turner into an apparent state of acceptance as a matter of survival. In other words, we just accepted being here and accepted the treatment that we were getting. This must be the normal way of life. Let's just accept it. Carry on. You should just comply. Just comply. Nothing abnormal going on here, folks. Just comply. Leave that alone. All right. Man. And under Booker T. Washington's counseling of group acquiescence, they felt not only inextricably bound to America, but also strangely hopeful about their prospects. In other words, they started getting delusional, believing that somehow this devil is going to, humble himself enough to see us as, oh, my bad. You guys are equals? Okay, well, I'll start treating you as equals from now. In fact, you guys are free to do as you choose. No, that's not what was going to happen. That was further delusionment that you see rampant in today's time. Thus, Marcus Garvey, UNIA was increasingly challenged by homegrown interest groups, most especially the white-led NAACP and Du Bois, the erudite Harvard scholar. As a leading intellectual of his day, the Massachusetts-born son of a half Haitian father took great exceptions to the popularity of Marcus Garvey, the lightly educated autodidact from Jamaica. So right there, you have from our own ranks people the dissension coming and being fed. And the, here's the thing that we missed. When the whites infiltrated, they behaved the same way they did when they got us over here in the first place. It's the same thing. When they got up in Ghana and Nigeria and places like this, Benin, one group would act like the enemy and will be fighting you directly head on. The other group will join up in your opponent's side and support them, causing you to be divided. So you had those who would say, "Hey, we should fight this enemy," and then those of you who would say, "No, we shouldn't. We should just accept them and let them come in. They're our brothers in Christ," defeating us in turn. This is no different than that right there. They saw that there was dissension. They saw that the boy was on a different side of the axis than Garvey. They saw that what Garvey was promoting was something that could actually work and would have been helpful to us. It would have been nutritious to us mentally, physically, and spiritually, the moves that Garvey was making. They didn't want us to go. Us going would have been a hazard to their own economic success and development. So what was Du Bois talking about? Stay? Okay, let's go ahead and put our money in Du Bois. And in the meantime, let's look for ways to shut Garvey up. So in addition to their differences over fight or flee tactics, Du Bois and Garvey were separated by a more primal divide that could not be reconciled and that was keenly reflected among their followers. This shadowy ghost had plagued Negroes down through the generations as the group's nasty little secret: skin color. Another ruse that whites used against us, favoring investing in the light skin, investing in those that were closer to light skinnedness, and shunning or degrading darker skinned, so that our psychology would be affected by that. And we would say, well, shoot, we need to start doing like that, and because then we'll get treated right. Maybe that's the way we get justice. Maybe that's the way we get treated as equals, is being like this. Nonsense, madness. Among individuals and families of Malcolm's childhood, for instance, many light-skinned Negroes judged the social fitness, intelligence, status, and the potential compatibility of others within the race by their admixtures of white bloodlines. I even know folks who to this day believe that the first of humanity were white folks, that all the prophetic figures that you read about in your biblical scriptures, they believe that these folks were white, that anybody that of any sense of wisdom or sage characteristics or anything that means anything, the individuals at the head of that, they believe these people to be white. Any scholar, anything, inventions, whatever, you name it, it must have been a white person that did it. Must have been. It couldn't have possibly been a dark-skinned person. This disease really, truly, deeply infected us and still infects us to this day. To this day. Those with lighter shades, along with softer hair texture, the good hair, right? The good hair, the so-called good hair, and rainbow eye colors, were dubbed high yellows, red bones, and simply mixed race. And as such, they generally assigned themselves a superior status within the Negro race. As your skin gets lighter, your future gets brighter. There's some people in the South, like in the Mexico area, who tried to who practiced like a policy of lightening the people. They believed that they were fixing or correcting the people's genetics. You understand that this must be a mistake. So we've got to correct this mistake and make you white, and thus make everything right again. Right, white must be right. See, they're ruling us. They're doing all blah blah nonsense, bogus nonsense. What are you getting into over there? Okay, I gotta keep an eye on you. Yeah, a little side note. I had this nicely growing eucalyptus tree, nicely growing, all the leaves flourishing and everything. Suddenly I go into the where it's growing, and branches are snipped off, leaves are snipped off, all the way up to the point where the hands that were snipping them couldn't reach anymore. So you could just imagine how Baba felt. Anyway, back to our story, shall we? Oh man. As your skin gets lighter, your future gets brighter. Wow, that's what they were saying. Became a guideline of this prejudice, which, despite periodic ebbs, would survive into the 21st century. In most such instances, historically, both in the United States and in the West Indies, the white parent and grandparent was paternal and almost universally was absent after the birth of the child. As with Lewis's father back in Grenada, having washed their hands of the matter, these fathers generally lived on in respectable denial with their white families across town. Still, despite laboring under the white-black oppression of slavery, Jim Crow, and persistent racism, some Negroes steadfastly embraced the intra-group color distinction as they grasped for a semblance of power. Think of this, family. Think about how hard it is for some people to even believe that ancient Egypt was dark-skinned people. I mean, this should be a no-brainer when you think about it, because the region originally, even if you do your research and history will tell you that the region was dominated by dark-skinned people. The name itself implies dark-skinned people. But because it had been later invaded by a group of people called the Fatimids, which is an Arab tribe, and even some other times you had like Persians and whatnot that were there occupying it, people began to believe that these people of today must be the people who are the natives. And because of mentalities like this, it becomes ever more believable, because white must be right. Or in this case, light must be right. How is it possible that a mighty empire, mighty dynasties could have ever been dark complected people? How is this possible? Where do you see dark complected people ruling anything? This is the mentality that they would push. When if you do your homework, you realize before there was ever a such thing as a white human being, so-called human being, before there was ever a such thing, the world was dominated. The world was black. The planet Earth was inhabited, when it comes to the human being, by melanated peoples. Do your research. Oh, man. Thus, a subcaste system among Negroes, attended by the discriminatory pattern of behavior, sprang up along skin tone lines and has lingered over the generations as dirty linen in plain view. Negro leaders have generally not abstained or been spared. Early on, it was noted that Marcus Garvey's contempt for lighter skinned competitors was based on his experience with mixed race Jamaicans back home, and in part on what he perceived as skin tone chauvinism among American born Negro rivals in the NAACP, the National Urban League. High tone churches and other civic groups like Earl and Louise Little, their light skinned son Malcolm, had to contend with traces of this intragroup skin tone bias in dealing with key individuals and organizations throughout his life. Scholars have traced this behavioral pattern back to the period when mixed race slaves working within the plantation house would lord it over their brethren sweating in the fields. Whites generally looked on with stone-hearted indifference, if not denial, except when money was involved. Thus, all children of slave mothers were deemed by law to be chattel, no matter the race or circumstances of the father. President Thomas Jefferson, who had held 600 slaves, for example, reportedly fathered 6 children with a slave mistress selling hymns. Hold on one second here. Give me a second. All right. All right. I got to read that part again. I had a momentary distraction. Scholars have traced this behavioral pattern back to the period when mixed race slaves working within the plantation house would lord it over their brethren sweating in the fields. Whites generally looked on with stone-hearted indifference, if not denial, except when money was involved. Thus, all children of slave mothers were deemed by law to be chattel, no matter the race or circumstance of the father. President Thomas Jefferson, who held captive 600 slaves, for example, reportedly fathered 6 children with slave mistress Sally Hemings. Those who lived past infancy were listed on the household ledgers as Negro chattel. The more hands for the kitchen, the better. Nonetheless, a class distinction sprang up among the chattel slaves, encouraged by, perhaps by some. Give me a second here because that part is kind of cut off. Let me see if I can read it better. Encouraged perhaps by some white holders as a method of appeasing bonded mulattoes angling for advantages. Pardon me just one second here. All right, my pardon. Let's see. I said, nonetheless, a class of distinction sprang up among chattel slaves, encouraged perhaps by some white holders as a method of appeasing bonded mulattoes angling for advantages, no matter how slight. Not all fair-skinned Negroes played along. The great abolitionist Frederick Douglass, a notable mixed-race offspring, for example, reacted to his circumstance by rebelling against white men in denial who condemned their very own children to an inferior state of captive existence. In his narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, the ex-slave Douglass wrote, "The whisper that my master was my father may or may not be true, and true or false, it is of but little consequence to my purpose, whilst the fact remains in all its glaring odiousness that slaveholders have ordained and by law established that the children of slave women shall in all cases follow the conditions of their mothers." After the Reconstruction period, the U.S. Census designated all ex-slaves simply as Negroes and mistreated them as such. One drop of black blood made the case, as had been the custom for centuries. Mulattoes or mixed race types, save those secretly passing as Caucasians, were accorded the full range of racial suppression and reserved for the Negro in mass. They were banned from jobs reserved for whites, segregated under federal, state, and local Jim Crow practices, restricted to inferior education, housing, and public accommodations, barred from major league sports, assigned to all Negro military units, and more than a few were lynched without regard to their mixed blood ancestry, straight hair, light toned skin, or gray green eyes. Thus, denied white privilege and rejected even by their paternal blood relatives, a determined segment of the mulatto subcaste resorted to mimicking the petite aspects of American racism toward dark-skinned Negroes. Over the years, with some exceptions, this rising so-called black, I'm not even going to try this word, I believe it's pronounced Borgesis, right? Including some civil rights organizers, maintained the petite caste system, exercising economics, social, and psychological advantage over the darker Negro neighbors, and sometimes blood relatives, siblings even. The practice was almost common among Negroes along the Tidewater Basin of the Virginias in the District of Columbia, um, in large swaths of the Carolinas, and in niche of the deep South, such as Atlanta, and most especially in New Orleans and patches of Louisiana. But it was unknown in urban areas such as Chicago, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and even in New York City. Pardon me one second. Okay, family, pardon me for the interruption. Um, Functionally, the bright skinned Negro class screened out darker members of the race from prime enrollment at historically black colleges and universities, banning them altogether from certain Greek fraternities and sororities, and for the most part, excluding non mixed blacks from leadership roles in clubs and secret societies, and even as pastors and ranking officials in high toned black Protestant churches. Whites of Malcolm's day, if they noticed at all, mostly looked on in bemused connivance, angling always to accrue the benefits of such divisiveness within the suppressed race. And really, they're still doing this to this day, family. Still, over the generations, heroic and oftentimes complicated struggles against Jim Crow racism were often conducted by such mixed race men and women. Rejected by their white paternal relatives, these activists counter-rejected those bloodlines and on principle threw in aggressively with their darker brethren. These staunch race men included Negroes such as Booker T. Washington, the journalist, Samuel Cornish, and William Monroe Trotter, the writer James Weldon Johnson, and poet Jean Toomer, and the physician Charles Drew, as well as mixed race achievers such as the NAACP leader Walter Wright, the Reverends Adam Clayton Powell, father and son, Thurgood Marshall, Rosa Parks, and indeed W.E.B. Du Bois himself, even while battling the imposition of an inferior status by white Americans. Many of these mixed race types held out for their subcaste advantages over their darker brethren. And thus, just as Negro leaders of Malcolm's childhood differed over how to combat exterior white racism, they also squared off among themselves over the interior matter of skin tone chauvinism. Unlike the boy, who considered himself mulatto, Marcus Garvey was dark as a Singalese and proud of it. Yeah. And at the time of his birth, the British Commonwealth Census recorded Jamaica's population as 2% Anglo-Saxon, 18% mixed race Euro-Jamaicans, and 78% Afro-Jamaicans. This multi-tiered register of the minority, the white minority British settler colony foreshadowed the codifying of racial apartheid by the minority Boer government of South Africa. As in South Africa, the ebony majority in Jamaica was treated as a permanent underclass. They were looked down upon, if not despised, not only by the white settler colonialists on the island, but also by mixed race Euro Jamaicans. Unlike these countries, the United States, with a safe white majority projected into the mid 21st century, has only recently seen demographers toying with population control devices that would fragment minority groups, grounded by African Americans into such divisive categories as mixed race, non-white Hispanics, browns, people of color, etc. Sound familiar, family? As an unmixed Afro-Jamaican, Garvey abandoned all hope that whites and the mulatto class on the island, backed by the British Empire, would voluntarily relinquish their privileged status. So the fiery UNIA leaders set out to force this double-barreled issue of race and subcaste inequality at home as well as in the United States, casting aside subtlety as a matter as in all matters of policy. Garvey drafted UNIA doctrine calling for a pure black race, just as all self-respecting whites believe in a pure white race. According to the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey, compiled by his second wife, Amy Jakes Garvey, I am conscious of the fact that slavery brought upon us the curse of many colors within the Negro race. Garvey stated, but that is no reason that we ourselves should perpetuate the evil. Hence, instead of encouraging a wholesale bastardy in the race, we feel that we should now set out to create a race type and standard of our own, which could not in the future be stigmatized by bastardy, but could be recognized and respected as the true race type, anteceding even our own times. Accordingly, Garvey notably disparaged even his Negro heroes, such as Booker T. Washington, born to an enslaved cook and an unknown white man, and the great Frederick Douglass, citing their unfortunate circumstance of being brought into the world through bastardy, the rape of one race upon the other, the abuse of the mothers of one race by the men of the other. It did not escape notice that leaders of the UNIA were darker hued than leaders of the Negro movements of the day. The NAACP, for example, fielded mainly light-skinned Negro officials. Its famed Walter White was indistinguishable from a Caucasian to the most discerning eye. Thus, the bold African palette of UNIA leaders shamed some Negro groups that, taking their cue from the integrated NAACP, branded themselves as colored. The UNIA emphasis was on black, recalled Thurgood Marshall, the nation's first Supreme Court justice of his race. When they would parade up 7th Avenue, Marshall recalled years later, if my brother and I were out there in the street, we had to get off the street, right in the middle of Harlem. I mean, no light-skinned Negro was allowed around. The blunt-speaking jurist quite likely exaggerated a bit, but his recollections accurately reflect the clash of skin tone cultures that proliferated within the Negro race, a tension that weakened its unity. For instance, when Garvey attempted to recruit William Pickens Sr. away from the NAACP, where he was an executive officer, the dark-skinned Phi Beta Kappa Yela graduate refused as a matter of principle and charged that Garvey tried to draw the black Negroes of America away from those of lighter skin. It was an intra-group tug of war between officials on both sides. W.E.B. Du Bois likely adopted the high yellow preference while an undergraduate at segregate Fisk College, where such prejudice were common. Already a national leader, he took Garvey's countermove against caste privilege as a personal affront. Within the pages of the crisis, the NAACP journal that he had created a year after the group's founding, Du Bois campaigned against Booker T. Washington's call for black intellectual acquiescence, and he wanted no part of Garvey's Back to Africa movement. Along with slamming UNIA policies, the Harvard scholar also attacked the West Indian caste's education and physical appearance. A little fat black man is how Du Bois described Garvey in the Century magazine in February 1923. Ugly, but with intelligent eyes and a big head. He followed up this caste put down by drafting a bill of particulars against the fiery Jamaican for Negro readers. Garvey countered that Du Bois was pure and simply a white man's nigger, who was a little Dutch, a little French, and a little Negro, a monstrosity. The rabid mulatto, he said, deserves a horse whooping. In less personal tones, however, some disciplined followers of these two pillars of Negro liberation would submerge the skin tone issue to a point of being a non-issue. Relatives of young Malcolm's father in Georgia, for example, were surprised to learn early on that Louise was just as devout to Garveyism as her dark-skinned husband. While quite proud of her light skin, as well as of Malcolm's Louis. My apologies. While quite proud of her light skin, as well as of Malcolm's, Louise did not consider Garvey's color fixation a matter of personal consequence, choosing instead to work for the larger cause of black unity as far as the family was concerned. Said Wilfred, my mother was always making us see the importance of not making a color distinction. She told us the reason I married your father was because he was dark. I wanted my children to have some color. She always made us feel proud of our black father. She would never let you say anything derogatory about somebody because they were black. In those days, there were many people who did make something out of color. The community would try to establish this caste system. There were the blacks, there were the browns, there were the yellows, and on down the line. They would make much out of that. We never got caught up in that sort of thing. As far as we were concerned, blacker was the best. As in other matters of social grounding, young Malcolm's family stood out among Negroes as something of an exception. Okay, family. That is page 48. We're going to pause there at the 3 lines for today, for the night. And I hope that we were able to take something valuable in from tonight's reading. It's heavy. Right now, it's deep. That's all I can tell you right now. It's real deep. You know, when you look back into these moments. Yeah. So look out for me, perhaps Wednesday, same time, same place, 8:30, for us to continue our reading of the Dead Are Rising, The Life of Malcolm X by Les Payne. And for now, I will take my leave from the family and pray that you have a blessed rest of your day and that all the righteous amongst us continue our pursuit in unity, continue our pursuit in increasing love among each other, peace among each other, and that we pave our way to success. Yes, indeed, family. This is your brother Abdul, dude, aka Questman, coming at you. This was a live Soul Journey of Life, Conscious Black social media. Be sure to check out souljourneyoflife.org and sign up, subscribe if you haven't yet. Make it your home for social media activities. Let's do something useful as a community, as a collective together, an intellectual body of brothers and sisters. Let's come together to keep the light on. Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, shalom, peace and blessings be with you, family. Have a blessed rest of your day. Take care.
Welcome to your wake-up call. Soul Journey of Life, Conscious Black social media. The light dome.
Bye.